Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 1st of December conformance meeting for the subgroup of SIG architecture. I'm your host today, Hippie Hacker, with Rian taking notes behind the scenes. And they have a code of conduct, which I think everyone here is familiar with. We have an open time box session initially. We'll go through on that agenda, and then we'll go through specific tickets afterwards. Feel free to add things to that if you haven't done so already. First on our agenda is some fallout from a recent CVE. So I will bring up the technical advisory for that. Looks like the container shim API is exposed to host network containers when using containerd. This is not so great. So probably don't do host networking when you're doing containerd. It's the very, very short version of that. And right now we have conformance tests, I think, that require that. So there was a suggestion by them to, pardon me, to not switch on host networking for pods, which means a couple of our conformance tests won't work. There's also some thoughts around updating our verbiage on not requiring. I think in that same issue, there was a conversation on should we update our requirement to include any test that needs to be, the cluster to be insecure to pass should be discouraged. I don't want to make a call on that. So a few people on the call, and we probably give it some time to be discussed on the mailing list and chat. Does anybody have any thoughts around this particular CVE or the conformance test removals that are suggested? Rian,
yeah, I guess, I mean,
go ahead.
Just one idea was, I'm not sure, I've not looked at the particular test, but can you modify the test not to use host network, or are those tests absolutely, I mean, do they absolutely require host network and not cluster network, I guess? That's something we could look at. Or the other alternative would just be to demote those tests, I guess.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think we should definitely look at those tests and see if they can be modified. And I think we're in a long cycle at this point. We can't demote something during the last week of test freeze. I don't know if I would want to do that. So we have an entire probably 3 months before we hit test freeze again for 121. So probably an AI here might be to create a list of tests and see how hard it is to remove that, the use of host networking. No, we can't do it in 120 for sure. We'll give a roadmap on that shortly. There's not any more thoughts on our CVE for containerd as it relates to conformance test. I have 2 links here in the document. One is the HTML, which I'll go through, and then one is the markdown. I'll copy the markdown and maybe paste it into our chat somewhere. How do I get the chat to come up? There it is. So you can follow along there. And then I'll go through the presentation in this style. Maybe if I can figure out how to launch a tab. Right click, open link. There we go. So this is our final review for conformance for 1.20. We are through test freeze. Nothing else is going to happen in this release. Again, we've had very decent and consistent progress over time. So we're not trying to change too much other than iterate through our working methods and the underlying supporting technology to increase our velocity, but keeping it in a stable and consistent way. One of the things I thought we'd bring to the top of the chart this time is We have the graphs, and this is really just copy and pasting the numbers from the graph. It's sometimes nice just to see those raw numbers, to see that since 114, we went to below 20% to above 60% in, what is this? This is about two years, 2.5 years. And that's exciting. So we don't have too much longer to go. And just so we can kind of see where that data comes from, there's a link here for API Snoop. And the conformance progress tab has our list of the total for this release. And then you've got untested and tested. So you can see 155, 179, 216, and back at this graph, 155, 179, 216, and so on. And so it's just a ratio of the entire number of tests, of endpoints that we do test, versus the untested ones that remain. You've noticed that the tested ones go up, the untested ones go down, and the total increases as we add new endpoints. So those three numbers, while it's not the most perfect way to measure it, it gives us a pretty good feeling of how far we've progressed over time. So this is our final update and our final results. Our primary OKR for the 120 release was to obviously increase stable coverage, and it'll probably always be that. We really, really, really wanted to get to 30, and we had hoped we would get to 40. Reality is we got 24. And this is a link to all those, and I'll open them all up real quick just to give a quick list of those. Here is the controller lifecycle test, the pod resource status lifecycle test, the V1 apps deployment. And these all list the endpoints and our flow of promotions for making sure that those are complete. And we'll talk about why we didn't reach all those in the next, we reached all of these, but they're ones we weren't able to reach. Some of those other conformance news related, there were 8 new endpoints promoted to GA. This was, I think this is part of the enhancement issue for the, which one is this? This is the runtime class. So this runtime class feature was started in 2018 by Tim Allclair. And we get down here to the bottom, this just got GA'd in 1.20. And there was a list of conformance tests that were needed to be promoted as well. So this link that we follow here is actually the link inside of API Snoop at the top level that shows what was the promotion release and the tested release. If we go back, that's always going to be, anytime we have this turquoise area will be when we promoted new endpoints to GA with our tests. One thing that's nice about this is we were able to use some of our release informing jobs to notify us that we had new GA endpoints that didn't have test. It was a little difficult in that the promotions occurred within the last 2 weeks of the release cycle, and the team for runtime class did not know that they needed 2 weeks soak time on their test to do promotion. So I think it was a little bit rushed to get these through, and we put a few exceptions in there. But we did work with the SIG release team to update the KEPs and to include the need for them to give us more time to get those GA endpoints out. In addition to 8 new endpoints that came with test, we removed 13 endpoints of debt by marking them ineligible. So, and that was based on community feedback. So the first thing is there are now 75 endpoints that are themselves ineligible. And that large list is pretty much the NodeProxy area. And here was our conversation with the community that the NodeProxy endpoints cannot be conformance tested, and the full list there. The feedback happened in several different ways. I won't go into the details of that, but we could consider those 13 endpoints a reduction in debt. We don't currently calculate it that way because it wasn't work that was included in a test written and promoted and coordinated by this team. but it does reduce our overall debt by reducing that end target number. Any questions on this area before we go to the next bit?
So the total number of tests, is it equal to the total number of conformance tests, or is it a subset in the chart you have?
Most of our metrics are not concerned with the number of tests. They're concerned with the number of endpoints. And the easiest way to look at it is at the very top page. This lists all of the endpoints by grouping of stable, which for the most part is a lack of an alpha or beta in the URL. And then the group version kind, so this is the group. So then we use the group here. And underneath that, all of the endpoints. If we have an endpoint that is tested, it means that the E2E binary set the user agent to itself E2E, and we detected it, but it wasn't a conformance test. If we have a conformance test that hits it, we mark it as conformance test. That's how we know that all of these endpoints are here. This list is slightly larger than the ones over on this list here, because we have excluded the stuff that's ineligible. There's a little link here that we just looked at for list of ineligible endpoints. So these endpoints, so there's actually 75 more that we don't count in this graph. We have the ability to bring up the database and query test, which is part of our workflow when we're trying to work on new tests or identify tests that hit existing endpoints. But we don't normally, we haven't incorporated that into the front end UI for API Snoop. I think it's going to get harder from here on out. We're hitting that 60% barrier, and things are getting, we had some of the reasons we had a lot of difficulty this release, and I'll close all these extra windows so that it's a little more clear what we're focusing on. We've had lots of deflaking. So we've had jobs going up and down, and some of it's been on infrastructure. It seems a lot of it. So these two promotions that we were actually able to get through, they weren't from this release. They were from a release 2 releases ago.
I think they might have started in 1.18.
If you look at when we started working on this test, it was a couple releases ago, but we had flakes. And as we've looked into it, it was probably due to setting the timeouts too low on provisioning our pods. And after we were able to look at those flakes and bring them up, we finally got to include them. And figuring out what those edges are on flaking is something we've had to learn. And I'll close those particular issues. We have also had policy changes, and some of those policy changes are related to the logging. We lost our audit logging because of a change in the configuration, and we also weren't logging particular types of events because the logging of the original, we depend on audit logs. And you can set up your audit policy to only log a few things, and we were missing several endpoints. And in changing that policy, we were able to actually get them back. So that was a bit of a hindrance for us this particular release. We're also running into pushback because they're upstream bugs. And so it's not just writing a test anymore, it's trying to incorporate the and make changes upstream. Like this limit API server redirects is a request because the API server is currently allowing possibly too many things, and we can't, the request is we don't write tests for things that still need to be fixed. And so as we hit those, all that research kind of gets put on hold as far as progress output from our team. We also have some areas that are still open for head and options. So all 3 of these related to upstream bugs are obviously holding back a few of our points. And that's the main information on this point. It's a pretty heavy slide as far as But I just want to make the point that things are getting harder and they're not getting easier. We also have to build new images. This job is still not fixed, and it's not easy to trigger. And I was on the call with SIG testing this morning, trying to figure out how we can make it easier for, because this is blocking 12 endpoints here, to make those images available for our test to use. This isn't a bad thing, but it's requiring a lot more community interaction, and we're getting a bit of latency. It's likely due to the world being in a stressful place and people having a lot of things going on, but the latency on our communications with folks tends to have an impact as well. Summarize, it's getting harder. And then that is that the remaining endpoints are likely going to take a bit more effort, to be clear. Some really cool news for our key result 2. Key result 1, we got 24 out of 30, which I think from Google standard is around 75. So it's not, it's a success, but it's at 80%, right? So I'm still happy with that. But we did knock it out of the park for our second key result, and that was cleaning up technical debt. We had a goal of cleaning debt back to 115, and we were hoping to clear it back to 114. But what we actually did was clear debt all the way back to 111. So back to 111. Here we go. The next debt is back here. Everything from 112 forward, anything promoted from then on is now conformance tested. This is really cool.
Nice.
This is over a year of technical debt erased in a single release. Yay! The other key result from 121 was that release blocking job that we had started. Our initial conversations were PR blocking, no ability to promote anything to GA that did not have conformance test. And it turns out it's kind of a people problem, not a technical problem. We could try to do it all in one PR, but I think the number of things that need to occur for that is too high. So you decided to instead do a release informing, release blocking job where CI signal can say, oh, we're going to have to revert that before the release because the requirements in your KEP proposal for the release requires that you have this. So making it more human than technical. So some progress on that. I'll go ahead and close our links for here. We have our K-infra job running on Prow. It's gaining traction for the conformance gate. This first one is where we actually merged that job into Kubernetes test infra. So that's prow.case.io. Status is still currently failing. I think it's because we probably need to update our underlying job here. We have 2 new endpoints to get service account issuer and get service account OpenID configuration, which need to be added likely to our do not test or updated to be beta. We need to do a little more research into that one. We also have our, I'm not sure why that one came up. That was gaining traction. It's probably, oh, it's in use. So you can see that API Snoop links for the gate were used to catch runtime class. So Sergey, definitely close to release date, got informed, hey, we're going to need some to get this across the line and tested. So that's when I was able to drop links to API Snoop. So that gate was able to quickly turn the wheels of let's be sure that these other endpoints get, there were no tests at all. And we needed to get those next ones conformance tested. I'm just going to have to, I don't know how to quite make this the right size. There we go. And the last one is that prow status, which we need to get on those few new endpoints that just came through. Further automation is still in progress to where we actually create a pull request to API Snoop's underlying data, which is kind of the final part. So when there's a change in coverage, whether it's an introduction of a new endpoint like this, or yay, we wrote a new endpoint that got a new test, or got a test that got a new endpoint, or promoted, that would be inside of a PR where we can actually discuss and note it. Currently, it all gets kind of lost in the noise, and we have to pull it up and point to it in our presentations. Any questions over the the job, the KK job? All right, so other important news in case you were not aware, 1.20 was it wasn't a short cycle, it was a long cycle, but the test freeze was fairly short. So we only had from November 23rd to December 8th. So our code freeze is coming up, and we're probably releasing next week, it looks like. So as far as 121, the release date for that, it's still under discussion. We'll go there and check that out. This is the HackMD where they're trying to make a choice between, do we want 3 releases a year or 4 releases a year? And we don't know yet, so we'll hopefully hear about that from SIG release after a while. The next one is Taylor Wagoner is the human at the CNCF who has been managing the conformance program from the CNCF's perspective since the beginning. And so when companies submit the results, she has manually gone through and changed and checked the PRs. We added the support for our a proud job that we wrote that runs in the CNCF cluster to add that there were no failed tests, that we actually got the right number of tests in, and assisting so that it's very accurate representation. We've had people before that submit the right number of tests, but they weren't the right tests themselves. And that's too much of a burden to put on a human to try to assess those. So we thank Taylor for her time and are glad to be of service. So our conclusions for the entire 120, we did not allow any new technical debt. We did clear technical debt back to 111. We did get 32 new conformant endpoints, 8 of which brought along by promotion with the endpoints and the test, and 24 by us. And we had 13 newly ineligible. So that's 45 if you want to look at it as far as debt cleared or kept off the board. And overall, percentages aren't the best metric, realize, but overall we got about a 9% eligible coverage increase in this release as opposed coming up from 119. I'm super happy with these results, and I'm proud of the team. Looking forward on 121, no radical changes. I think we're on the right track for how we're engaging. It is going to be hard, but I still, even though we didn't reach our goal of 30, I still want to keep the same goals as 120. I think there were a few gotchas here and there, but I think we can still maintain the velocity, even though we just fell just slightly short again, but at 80%. And just as a reminder, I think these endpoints are going to get harder to get off the board. So with that in mind, our key result 1 for 1.21 is we're going to still try for 30 new endpoints in spite of it being harder. And I'd love it if we could get to 40. This would be a combination of things going just right and us trying really hard, but we definitely want to have that stretch goal in place. We would love to clear out debt all the way back to 1.9. That's going to require at least these 7 specific endpoints getting off the board. And we're actually engaging with API machinery, I think, in order to try to get these cleared. So any other questions or feedback for our team as we wrap up the 120 OKRs, or questions on our goals for 1.21?
I would just say that, I mean, this has been great progress actually. From 68 tests in 114 to 263, that's a great number.
Thanks. We've worked hard to make it so.
I know.
It takes a village to raise an API.
Hey, I have a question. When you say that X amount of code debt has been cleared, is that from the code base? the Kubernetes code base?
Let me show you where that sits. So on the API Snoop website, under conformant progress, there's two main charts we use. One is at time of release, which shouldn't change too much. There is ways that it does change because of how we tag metadata, but for the most part, once that release is cut, we shouldn't see much of a change in the graph. As opposed to down here, conformance coverage by release, we should probably say today, you'll see that it's as of today. And if we look back, debt is created or introduced like this orange stuff, this shouldn't happen. So in 1.14, all of these were promoted, and they were promoted without test. But if we sort, we can see we cleared a lot of that in 1.17, then we hit a few in 1.19, then we cleared a few in 1.20. And that debt's been cleared. However, if we go back further and we look at stuff that was introduced, let's just go all the way back. Well, let's go see those endpoints that we're sharing. I think here's the one endpoint for 1.12, 1.11. Hopefully that clicked just right, and one here. So going back from now, we cleared this 1.12 endpoint that was promoted in 1.12. We got it in 1.19. So it's no longer going to appear in the debt. However, we've got these two endpoints that were promoted in 1.11 that still do not have test, again, related to that service status and API registration. The other ones are here. It's kind of a mixed. For 1.10, we have these 5 endpoints that aren't tested, but the rest were captured in the 1.17 release. And rather than clicking through all those, if you just want to see the current debt, you just scroll down to the bottom and can tell that that's all cleared up to here. So the remaining debt, like 1.9, because that's what we'll probably try to intentionally focus on in the later release. We go to 1.9. It actually be these two columns combined together. Like here were the endpoints introduced without debt. Here, untested. And I'll still have to go back and do some more mangling to get us to go further than that. But that's the full list of debt here, very specific on the list of tests. And I think Rion's actually done some more research specifically in this, because most of this is all apps. So underneath the apps, this is definitely on daemon set. So there'll be a lot of daemon set work, deployment stuff, replica set stuff. These are old APIs. They're definitely core, and they're completely untested.
Oh, wow.
This is not to scare. This is just facts, and I ken the technical debt we've accrued by being a very successful restaurant where we've had to keep going, and the kitchen's got a bit messy and there's dishes to be washed. And so we're the dishwashers that are coming in and making sure that the kitchen can keep operating and serving up the delightful community food plates that we serve up. That's our wrap up of the 120. Any thoughts? So I think the main caveats and data, we're going to try again for 30 points. We think it's going to be hard, but that will, and depending on how long the release is, maybe we can put in that extra stretch. I think that actually mostly covers our details here. This is if you want to look at the actual list of 24 endpoints, it's this red area, old endpoints covered by new tests. Here's our 24 tests. So they were promoted back. A lot of this was 1.5 debt, 1.8 debt, 1.9 debt, and all of it was tested in this release, previously untested.
Do you have like some criteria to prioritize among these untested ones?
This group and this call are kind of where we talk about that. Like we said, we're going to try to get rid of those 5 endpoints for those last 2 releases to try to slowly work backwards in time on the debt. We had talked about at different points running. I think it was actually with the VMware and the constructing something where we run something like Sonobuoy, but we collect the application data. to see which APIs, what applications are popular. I think it was several, sorry, let me deconstruct that. We wanted to look at popular Helm charts. So trying to look at the logs for popular Helm charts from looking at the downloads from the Helm repository. That's going to be less useful now because the Helm repositories have since been distributed out to the various projects themselves when you say Helm repo add. So we can't do that anymore. We also thought about, anyway, so prioritization methods. There's been a focus on pod, I think, in the past. And we looked at going beyond just hitting endpoint because pod itself is a super complex and core type, but that would require looking at and measuring conformance differently based on the number of fields. And I think we did some initial research and there were 77,000 different field depth combinations that Kubernetes could use from the top level of the API. And nobody, I think we all just shied away from that. So right now, the focus is, and the prioritization is clear. If you just click on that conformance area, we're just working from the oldest, the newest to the oldest. When we get back here to this 1.5 area, I'll do a bit more research and try to break it down to what was 1.5, 1.4, 1.3, 1.2, and all the way back to 1.0. So we can actually see when was that API introduced and have we got tests for it. If you've got ideas for prioritization, feel free to throw them out there. Part of it has been us, and probably when I say it's going to get harder, we have definitely looked for easier endpoints to test. And if we see one's a bit difficult, we do push it back a bit because our metric of success right now is trying to visually reduce that debt down as something we can see in a metric of endpoints themselves. So it is a bit of shoving the harder things down the road. If there's things that you find important, writing tests for them would be a great way to prioritize them getting in.
Right, makes